Good afternoon, folks, and welcome back to our asynchronous Rhetoric 306 course at the University of Texas. It is still me, Dr. Sapio. Indeed, welcome back to Rhetoric and Writing. I'm excited to talk to you all this week and continue our conversations we inaugurated last week about some of the key terms and definitions that we'll be working from this semester, including rhetoric, the idea that there are many communicative devices that we can employ, that we can analyze as others have employed them, and indeed, as we move into Units 3 and 4 of this course, proposing our own rhetorical actions and executing those in our multimedial projects upcoming. For this past week, most urgently, you all attended to the concepts of the communicator, the message, and the audience. These three elements constituting the rhetorical triangle in any rhetorical situation, in any occurrence or event of communication or speech or persuasion. You looked at the person or entity responsible for the act of communication as you were beginning to read and analyze some of the Project 1 documents about water quality here locally in Texas and beyond. You looked into exploring the content or the gist, summarizing, essentially paraphrasing what the message is in some of those articles on your first discussion post for this past week. Thank you for those of you who have those posted already. Indeed, they are due today. There's still time in the day to get those up if you haven't yet, or to catch up and have those done as makeup work. And finally, you looked into who the intended recipients of the New York Times article, the New Yorker piece, the Midland piece, or the Statesman article was, whatever your choice was from those Project 1 documents. So I look forward to having continued discussions with you on that discussion board regarding your discussion post 1, and then launching off today and this week, kind of layering on top of this three-pointed rhetorical triangle of the communicator, the message, and the audience. Also, we're going to, add or weave on top of that the significance of the three appeals: logos, ethos, and pathos. So we're going to get into that today. For now, I'm going to direct your attention quickly to a video advertisement to see if in this real life example, a piece of communication or rhetoric that every one of us is exposed to on a daily basis, advertisements, right? Let's think about these concepts of the communicator, who is responsible for the creation of this piece of communication, this advertisement. What's the message, the content, the gist of what the ad is trying to communicate, and who is potential, the intended audience here, who would potentially be most persuaded or moved by what is being communicated. So let's take a look quickly at this advertisement and we'll come back and talk about it.
Code red for humanity.
Temperatures have risen faster than any.
Experts say time is running out for
farmland becoming arid, crops being decimated,
extreme heat waves, droughts, and flooding, which threatens the global food supply
out across the globe. But the worst is yet to come.
How are we going to fix the planet? It's wrecked already. You can't just unwreck something that's already wrecked. What other choice do we have? Die. We need to be positive. Okay, I'm positive we're going to die. Let's start small. Hunger. How's that sound?
Hunger isn't small.
Okay, well, it's easier to wrap our heads around. People who need food don't have it. That seems like something you can fix, right? Stamps.
What do you mean stamps?
We just put postage stamps on all the food, and then we can just drop it in the mail and send it to whoever needs it.
What if the government made food companies send a percentage of what they make to food banks?
That's just taxes.
grow bigger food, like those pumpkins at the fair.
They don't let you eat those.
Do you know how much food grocery stores throw out? It's crazy.
Companies don't care about people, man. They're not gonna do anything.
Hey guys, where do foods go on vacation?
Where?
Paris.
Oh, that's a horrible joke.
That was funny. Pretty soon, we won't even be able to grow food because of climate change.
My dad says it's not the heat, it's the humidity.
What if we made groceries really expensive for billionaires? Like, this granola bar would be $1 billion.
And why would anyone buy that for $1 billion?
To flex, of course.
What if we froze everyone for 1,000 years to give Earth time to heal?
You watch way too much science fiction. What if we just had vegetables in all the food to, make them healthier?
Like carrot cake.
Carrot cake isn't healthy. The world has way too many problems.
Well, someone's gotta do something.
You're right.
What about aliens? If they're advanced enough to get here, they'll probably know what to do.
That's a stupid idea.
You got a better idea?
No.
Okay, so thank you all for watching that advertisement with me, which is created by, right, paid for. Surely, I mean, think of the number of humans in the room, in the PR firm, the writers, the videographers, the time and effort, the money that went into producing this piece of advertisement. On the part of, what? Did everybody catch that? Do you need to go back and rewind the video to catch who the communicator was? Are they selling trucks here? Are they selling clothing? What is this advertisement for? And if you watched very carefully, send me an email and let me know if you caught the first time around that this was produced by Made Good, which is apparently a granola bar company. Did you notice the scenes when the kids were eating their granola bars, right? So part of our task this week, as you saw in your reading of the textbook, chapter 1, in which you saw questions about exploring who the communicator is and how they establish their argument through ethical appeals, right? Through saying, we're essentially good guys here. We're not trying to sell you anything. You can trust us, right? The name of this company, after all, is called Made Good. I mean, how else do you need to further establish goodwill there except in the name? And furthermore, in chapter 1, you also saw questions to help guide you through exploring what the content or the gist of the message is, the reason or the sense of it. And in this case, it's interesting that, you get text there at the end of the advertisement in the form of, we're on a mission, join us. That's the explicit call to action. And perhaps implied there is also buy our granola bars. Perhaps they're delicious. Perhaps you too can have fun or have children who are happy and safe also if you purchase our products, right? That's the more kind of implied assumptions there in the way the logic is functioning. And lastly, think about the audience as you did in your discussion post 1.1. So we've just outlined there the communicator, the message, and then moving into the audience, that 3-part rhetorical triangle. Again, as you did with discussion 1. And you can apply those skills, those tools to any piece of rhetoric to analyze as a habit of mind. So who's the presumed audience here? For whom is this intended to be a persuasive advertisement? Is it intended to be persuasive for children? It's interesting that child actors were chosen for this advertisement. Is it intended to be more persuasive in certain parts of the country rather than others? I wonder. Interesting here that this opening scene I paused on again says hurricane hits East Coast, right? Is there a kind of coastal versus Midwestern demographic here that would be more or less persuaded by the content, by the kind of environmental activist message that is quite explicit? Who's meant to be persuaded there? Who alternatively might be off-put by the message? All of that certainly has been considered and studied carefully in focus groups by the PR company before they put this piece out. So that just gives us another additional layer, an example to look at in addition to the ones that you considered from your Project 1 documents for last week and that you'll continue looking at this week for your homework 1.1. So next I want to go back to our slides and take a look at another example, and we'll be right back. So that advertisement is a great example because as I was arguing, we are inundated with that particular type of communication so regularly in our lives that it's a great opportunity for us to practice, as I was saying, developing the habits of mind, which our textbook, Becoming Rhetorical, hopes that we will develop, which is why they have titled the textbook in that way. Becoming rhetorical is developing the habits of attending to the rhetorical pressures. So whenever you are encountering advertisement, signage, obviously political speeches, campaign advertisements, news articles, whatever it is, having in mind and always attending to who the communicator is, what the gist or the content of the message is, and who the proposed or intended audience is absolutely essential. And then let's add on top of that the rhetorical appeals. So chapter 1, in addition to distinguishing for you the difference between who is speaking and who is listening or receiving the message and then what that message is, you also have descriptions of the rhetorical appeals that are very helpful to review if you haven't already, and to review, i.e. look again at the chapter to remind yourselves of how rhetoricians, how we can employ ourselves and how we can analyze how others appeal to the audience based on emotional, logical, and character-based ethical appeals. So you have here on the right quick definitions of ethos, logos, and pathos. Ethical appeals being appeals based on the character, expertise, experience, authority, accuracy, or goodwill of the speaker, right? The idea that you might, for better or worse, right, be inclined to trust the authority of, for example, someone older rather than someone younger. Now we can talk about ageism and we can talk about the problems with assumptions, stereotypes. Nevertheless, there's an inherent ethical appeal associated with certain identity characteristics in our culture that we can critique, of course, but that, for example, someone takes into the classroom with them. If they are a professor with a little more gray hair, is that perhaps do students, even unconsciously or subconsciously trust what the professor is saying more? The more gray hair they have, right? Is that a kind of algorithmic or mathematical formula that is somehow correlated to knowledge or expertise or wisdom, right? What about just the goodwill speaker, right? How often have you heard the idea that first impressions mean everything, or to dress up for an interview? Or why do we even give children the advice to, be nice at school, right? The idea that you can develop some kind of relationship, trustworthiness, based on how you show up in a place. Again, for better or for worse, and we can analyze and critique all of the various forces that are all variables in that in that rhetorical situation. But the idea being that ethical appeals based on one's character experience. And sometimes that works with you, and sometimes that's something you have to work against to be persuasive in your field or in your position, okay? So we're going to continue to talk more about ethical appeals throughout the semester, and especially in, most urgently, your homework 1.1, in which you're going to quickly just get a quotation example of ethical, logical, and pathetic or emotional appeals from one of the Project 1 documents. So we're going to talk about that and remind you by the end of class. But that's just a quick preview for you for this week's homework. Logical appeals are the reasons, the sense, the organization of the message, how it proceeds from one point to the next, how evidence supports claims, whether there are fallacies or problems with logic inherent in a message, whether there are contradictory messages. This is all logical appeals, and we'll be looking carefully at these today with a number of weight loss ads to see where the logical appeals stand and where they fall. And lastly, pathetic or emotional appeals are when a communicator intends to persuade based on emotions, values, and beliefs of the audience. So being aware of those and intentionally deploying strategies to call on fear as an emotion that activates people, for example, or shared values such as patriotism or freedom in political speeches, for example, that appeal to those emotions in an intended audience. So again, we're going to look at these appeals as they're working in a few other examples today, and then your homework this week will be to walk us through quotation examples of ethical, logical, and pathetic appeals in one of your Project 1 documents. So in each case of rhetorical analysis, whether for homework 1.1 when we're looking at Project 1 documents, or as we encounter when we're becoming rhetorical in our daily lives, any particular act of communication or expression, we want to be considering this more expanded version of the rhetorical triangle, where it's not just the communicator and the audience, person to person, and then the message, whatever the content is, but overlayered on top of each of these elements. Whether you're dealing with the communicator, the audience, or the message, we're thinking about the appeals that are working in each case as well. So for the communicator, if I'm speaking in my capacity as professor, for example, as I've already mentioned with the kind of gray hair example, how can I be most persuasive in the classroom, specifically based on my expertise or experience, okay? Might I publish my CV, right? Might I make sure to make my publication record publicly available, right? Wouldn't it be significant or important that I am able to accurately reference the textbook, right? Accuracy being one of the elements in ethical appeals. as well. When you're reading a publication, isn't it important for the spelling to have been, copy edited, right? What do you think when you open up a published book? Of course, accidents happen, but what if every single time you opened up a new edition by Vintage Books or whatever, I'm just, Norton, whatever, it was just riddled with copy edit errors, spelling errors, right? That idea that unfortunately, first impressions do matter. And of course, Norton or whomever, Vintage Books, has wonderful people working there and people make mistakes. But appearance, correctness, authenticity, as far as ethical appeals, matters. When you think about the message up at the top, you're weighing and evaluating if the information is correct, if the argument is sensical. You're weighing the reasons, the evidence. Is the data current? Is it reliable? What's the structure of the piece? Is the argument disordered? Do you become disoriented as an audience member? What about, is the argument completely missing you as an audience member? Do you feel that your beliefs or values or experience is not acknowledged by a particular piece of rhetoric? So hopefully all of these questions are helping you to see when you encounter any written, visual, even a space, as we'll see in a moment, can be rhetorical or argumentative, or can involve communicators, messages, and audiences working through logical, ethical, and emotional appeals. So let's look at two examples quickly. There's no text here. What you see in front of you on the screen is a piece of visual argumentation. I'll just describe what I observe is a white sign with black iconography indicating three human figures with various clothing. On the left, the figure appears to be wearing a dress. On the right, the figure appears to be wearing pants, perhaps. And then the middle figure appears to be wearing kind of part dress, part pants. And I think it's fair to interpret this image as an inclusive bathroom sign. Whether you think this is a good or bad inclusive bathroom sign, or if you prefer a different iconography, is interesting, and I'm curious to hear if you want to share via email or on our Discord channel, which I'm going to talk about momentarily. But it's interesting to think about this, bathroom sign, which, if you're on campus or anywhere publicly, you encounter bathroom signs probably just as often as you encounter advertisement, right? Every day. And yet I wonder if you've paused to, and perhaps you have, and if you have, again, let's hear about it on Discord, send me an email. But especially if you haven't, I encourage you to pause and think about the persuasive and indeed argumentative, and I don't mean that negatively, I just mean in the case that everything, in the way that everything is an argument, is meant to be persuasive, is biased, takes a side one way or the other. That visual images are just as argumentative as essays, right? And so who is the communicator of this signage? When you encounter it in your day, is it the company that's posted it? Is it the artist who's designed it? Is it an individual employee whose activism, made this sign finally get posted in a place of employment, perhaps, right? What's the story with who's the communicator? What is the logic of this A piece of communication. What is the gist or the content of the message? You know, if you had to translate this visual into a sentence, what would you say the claim is here? Certainly a claim for inclusivity in public spaces, but also perhaps where folks might have a critique of this image is what is it saying about gender performance, about transgender identity with the kind of middle figure. There are many different ways to design inclusive bathroom imagery. So there's so many questions and so much to analyze as far as even the content here without any text so associated at all with this image. And then lastly, the audience. For whom is this sign an absolutely empowering, moving, touching encounter to have during a day? For whom is it offensive? For whom is it just, a neutral, part of the landscape just as much as a faucet or a door? Who's the intended audience here? Who's intended to be persuaded? And what that might say further about the communicator. So this, hopefully, and I'll pull my face on here. Sorry, because you've been just staring at a single image for a number of minutes now. Sorry about that. I hope this is an additional helpful example for us to see how layered, every instance of rhetoric, whether textual, visual, video, like we saw in the advertisement, or, as I mentioned and kind of previewed a moment ago, what about physical spaces? Here's the next example. Here's a room like where we might be if we were meeting on campus at the University of Texas. Here's a lecture hall. And I had said in passing just a moment ago that everything is an argument. Everything is argumentative, is making claims, right? And so what does the design of a space like a classroom have to say about the communicator? What is the message that a space like a classroom is arguing? And who is the intended audience? And you can ask these questions at any designed space. So is it the University of Texas? Is it the architects? Is it the administrators working on the design of the building? How different do classrooms look in Parlin Hall, for example, compared to the new Communications and Liberal Arts building, right? Does time make a difference as far as how we design classrooms, their accessibility, their audiovisual capabilities, etc., right? This one that we're seeing, this classroom, this kind of large lecture auditorium style, I think is very argumentative in its design. And let me know if you agree with me here, in that the focal point, like an amphitheater, or a movie theater or a concert hall, is very directed toward that podium area, right? That raised dais where presumably, according to the ethical arguments at work, right, the credible, authoritative, expert, experienced, professor is going to be on display. And the class dynamics that are just entrenched in that kind of space are, that kind of top-down lecture style. You're here to listen to me as the authority kind of space, right? And think about who in the audience that that does persuade, and who in the audience might be completely isolated and alienated by that experience. So consider that next time you're in a design space as well, how appeals are functioning, who is behind the communication of the design of that space even. And I wonder if we have architecture majors or other kind of design or art majors who want to share further thoughts on this topic. So let's go ahead and move into our last couple of activities before I set you free for your work this week. So I would like for everyone to complete this activity for a participation grade this week. This will be in the stead of a discussion post and a way for us to engage with one another asynchronously. We're going to do what I call a rhetorical artifact show and tell. Here you see on the board a few prompts that I would like for you to ask and consider about a particular artifact. And by artifact, I mean a song, an article, a poem, a sign, a campaign speech, any act or utterance or event of communication, okay? It can be an ad, a clip from a documentary, really absolutely your choice. It could be a notebook cover, the title of your favorite book, okay? If everything is an argument, then a rhetorical artifact can be anything. So select a rhetorical artifact. You're going to do a quick show and tell of it on our Discord server, which I have initiated this week and linked in the Canvas course page. I'll show you how to get over to that in a moment. And on your Discord server, when you open up the channel for Rhetorical Artifact Show and Tell, you'll be able to record a quick video or voice showing what you are bringing in. And answering one or a couple of these questions. You certainly don't have to answer all of them about your rhetorical artifact. So who created it? Who's the communicator of the item that you're sharing? What group or organization composed it? You might answer what the communicator's relationship to the subject is. In the case of the Made Good granola bar company, right? What did they have to do with environmental activism, for example? You can share about that quickly if that were your selected artifact. What does the communicator have to gain or lose as a result of this particular communication? What are the motivations, right? And what are the communicator's investments in the issue? And how might these affect what the communicator thinks and says? This is where financial motivations come into play, but there are other motivations, of course, for every instance of communication as well. Or thinking about the ethical appeals of the communicator, the last three questions ask, how does the communicator show practical intelligence? How do they demonstrate that they've done their homework, that they are experts or experienced in what they're talking about? How does the communicator show a virtuous character, that they're trustworthy enough to be listened to, or how do they show goodwill? So any one or several of these questions, but certainly not all of them, can be something that you can share on the Discord server. And let me show you how to access that quickly on the course website. Okay, so here we are back on our Rhetoric 306 homepage, and if you go down to modules, you're going to see, well, this is where you will have found already our week 2 video posted there under the weekly videos module, your ebook, of course, where you'll see chapter 2 and where you read chapter 1 for last time. There is your homework 1.1 to analyze the logos, pathos, and ethos in one of your texts from the Project 1 documents. And just here at the bottom of Unit 1 is where you're going to see the link to the Discord server for your show and tell. Again, here are the Project 1 documents for you to select from and choose one quotation illustrating how logical, pathetic, and ethical appeals are working in the text. I'll click there on Homework 1.1 so that you can see and preview what that assignment says specifically. Provide one quote or example for each appeal, and then one quick answer to the question, why does this quote qualify as each type of appeal? And for the last example I want to show you all today, I want to go into the course textbook. So to remind you again how to access that you go to modules and click on ebook there. Okay, so for our last example today, I'm on page 15 of the textbook, and I want to take, here you go, at these different communicative acts, all having to do with weight loss. And we can see how the message varies, how potentially different audiences may be persuaded or not, and where some of the messaging perhaps fails. So this first piece is by the American Diabetes Association, and you can, go in and Google that communicator to explore their credibility, expertise in the field, etc., publications, and judge for yourself whether that's a credible, accurate communicator. So we have a message here about healthy weight loss, about preventing or managing type 2 diabetes, and then clear instructions for setting goals, thinking about losing maybe 5 or 10 or 15 pounds. I'm going to the next page here. Straightforward kind of goodwill statements here, like don't look for a magic bullet diet. They don't exist. Do a physical activity self-check, okay? Compare that to language from, for example, Fit Magazine by Cassandra Kulik, an article, Miranda Parks visualized her way to a better body. Already you can imagine a different audience with different value systems, beliefs. Who would be more inclined to read an article by the American Diabetes Association, for example? Who would be more inclined to read or to encounter a piece from Fit Magazine? There might be different demographics, different age group, different gender, different body types, etc. So we have an article here you can peruse again in your textbook, an anecdotal story about Miranda losing almost 60 pounds in 2 years. Quotations like, I'd see a woman with long, lean leg muscles or really nice shoulders, and I'd think that's what mine will look like. What values or beliefs are being appealed to there in that piece? Beliefs about happiness or about body types as represented in the media are at work here in this piece with a subtitle like, You Can Get Fit Like Miranda. Isn't that a different set of appeals at work than the one we saw in the previous piece? And lastly, as seen on Oprah, lose weight using our medically approved, easy to follow system. Who's our here? Who's the communicator? Are we using the appeals to authority to Oprah, right? Are we supposed to buy this product because Oprah guarantees it? Call 1-800 today for your free private consultation, right? What are the communicators' motivations here? What are they hoping to gain or lose? These are all the questions that you are going to be considering this week as you review Chapter 1 again with particular attention this time to the appeals of logos, ethos, and pathos, and move into completing homework 1.1, in which you analyze how those are working in one of our Project 1 documents. Let's get back to the slides, and I'll make sure you're all set for next time. Okay, folks, so for next time, review the relevant reading about the appeals in Becoming Rhetorical, our e-textbook, again, found under modules in the Canvas course website. That was chapter 1, which you already read for last time, but you may need to review again to complete homework 1.1. But also move into chapter 2, which we'll be discussing next week. Do complete homework 1.1 found in modules using one of those Project 1 documents about water quality. We'll be discussing that much more next time, but just follow the instructions there for selecting one quotation illustrative of logos, ethos, and pathos appeals, as well as just a one-sentence explanation for why you think they qualify as each of the appeals. Third, select a rhetorical artifact for show and tell on Discord. Join us over there at the link in modules and share with us your rhetorical artifact. Again, that can be an article, a speech, a DVD, a book cover, your favorite music video, or something like we talked about today, a bathroom sign, the design of a particular public space. It really can be anything as you're becoming rhetorical and as a habit of mind, thinking about how communicators communicate messages to particular audiences using these range of appeals. Now that you're thinking that way, I think you can look around and really identify anything as a rhetorical artifact. So I look forward to seeing you over there on Discord this week to see those. Reach out to me with any questions and concerns. Always, you can contact me. I'm pulling up that slide now. There you go, at jsapio@utexas.edu, or during my office hours and by appointment. Okay, y'all take care, be well, send me emails, ask me questions. I look forward to chatting with you all soon and engaging with your discussion one post from last week, and looking forward to seeing your homework 1.1, which is due next Monday. All right, you all take care. Until soon. Bye-bye.